Question 1336. If you could shut down all news outlets and start again, would your new news empire be impartial or have an agenda?
Educating people on an agenda.
Okay. You're suggesting we would be the individual moguls in charge of all the news. Is that what you're suggesting with this?
Yes.
So we get to be Murdoch, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the first thing I would do is probably kill Murdoch. Like, I would use my empire to destroy his.
I fully support that decision.
The problem with this is, even if you set out to be impartial, there will inherently be biases that come into it.
Well, okay, let's just.
We asked if there was an agenda. There's an agenda of telling the news, because that hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah. See, I would like, for example, like with newspapers, for example, if I was, I would very much say have news and opinion pieces separate, rather than what seems to be with the current thing within journalism, that opinions are very much within the news and it's not just reported on factually.
Yes. Oh, there. 2 seconds. Math Pig, what were you going to say? What were you going to say at the start when I asked the question?
Is education an agenda?
I think so, yes. Because you're making a choice, in which case, in a lot of respects, as to what not to say.
Or how to say.
Nelly Rodent says, Rodent Imperial News would most certainly have an agenda. James Henry says, impartial. I bet you he'd have negative reviews of that PC.
I think the best you could do is try to be impartial. It would fail. It would absolutely fail, because there is no outlet I can think of in the world that is impartial. I mean, and I don't know why people hold the BBC up as a supposedly impartial news source,
because it is by far the most impartial. That's
BBC
the
is
but it is also very, very
bigoted
partisan on a number of
news
issues.
company.
And
Of course
it's
it has.
proven that.
Yes, that I don't dispute that, but it's still far better, unfortunately, than virtually any other news organisation. That's the worst
it's
thing.
not.
Compared to like Fox News or something,
There are areas where the BBC is absolutely
Oh
abysmal
no, I completely
and
agree. I'm
horribly
not.
bigoted.
Yes, I completely agree. But the BBC is still better than most. That's how bad. That's how bad the industry is.
I don't know. I mean, I just say go and watch the way BBC ever covers Israel and Palestine. You see
they have an agenda.
Bias that there is there.
They have an agenda.
Yeah,
that they always have. At the end of the day, this is the problem with the question.
This is
Everyone has an agenda.
You can set out. You can, even with the best will in the world, set out to be impartial, but I can't see that you could possibly stay impartial. And another thing is, one huge problem for and I've spoken to some journalists about this. One huge problem isn't necessarily proprietors leaning on them to write something a certain way or report something a certain way. That is a problem, but it is not necessarily the biggest problem. The biggest problem is on getting copy and getting things out there, and stories. It's always like instant reporting, and a lot of the time journalists are not given the time to actually really dig into stories. That is a bigger problem. So I think if I were a proprietor of something, I would try, if I could do one thing, it would be try to put more emphasis on in-depth
You want to be a proprietor of Private Eye rather than the BBC.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I mean, probably, I mean, in the UK, I'd say as far as daily newspapers go, the only two that try to do any in-depth investigative reporting are the Guardian and I don't like the paper, but probably the Telegraph. They're the only two even attempt to do any in-depth reporting.
Right, so let me catch up on the chat. Horror says Nout is neutral. Abram Perkins says define agenda. Spooky says impartial like it is now. Judy says I would try to be impartial. Ox says impartial like it should be. Never Again says it would be impossible to start a news empire without an agenda. Let's make the agenda to be impartial and factual. That would be lovely.
My turn.
Can I catch up on the chat first? Then I'm not behind. Just says facts only. I would format it in such a way that programs would not allow for opinion unless qualified by the legitimate education on a subject. Theo says impartial, have an agenda, aren't exclusionary in my opinion. No, you're right. Ahura says, and they're now redefining. So define education. They're now giving different ways of doing the stories from different directions. Ricardo says, isn't the agenda implicit? Even if you want to be 100% impartial, good luck with that, there is still an agenda. James Henry says, news outlets need advertising revenue. Chad says, I will be a benevolent dictator. Theo said, it is important to be transparent but have good values in my opinion. Borg says, agenda would be never talk about celebrities that don't deserve the attention and tell the truth about religion. Ahura says, the dog knows bollocks when it hears. Theo says, we're corrupt kids in industrial nations. We shouldn't make politics. James Henry says, America's PBS is also very good. Does PBS do news?
Public television.
Do they do news?
Yes, they do.
They do. I did not know that. Who gets to define education? Theo says, that's what I prefer, crowd-funded news. Yeah, Twitter is pretty much crowd-funded news. There's as much absolute shit there as there is decent. Jenny, go!
I don't like the use of the word agenda, but that's beside the point. There's I don't believe it's possible to have any human being that does not have implicit bias of one sort or another. If you're going to bring it into news, a news program, I don't care what your bias is. If you want to be a raging conservative, go ahead. If you want to be a raging liberal, go ahead. Tell that to your audience.
Yes, but they won't do that because you immediately get rid of your ability to manipulate people.
Well, that's not a news organization. Then you said a news organization, not a propaganda organization.
News as we are discovering, if there is an agenda, if there is a bias, there is automatically
No, news can have a legitimate bias one way or the other, or 3 or 4 ways in the other. But once you bring into propaganda, or try to label news as only one thing without admitting your bias, then it's propaganda.
Then pretty much all news we have today is propaganda.
Yes.
For the most part, yeah.
Now, propaganda doesn't mean just that which the state says. Propaganda can come from any source.
Yes.
And the other thing I want to do to defend journalism of today is I think most people in the world have very little clue on what it takes to put together a news story or a newspaper or something like that. Especially nowadays in our lands of instant everything and information worldwide instantly. It takes time for a news story to develop.
Yes.
Okay, period. I don't care what it is.
Journalistic integrity.
You can't possibly tell the whole story 5 minutes after it occurred.
Yeah, but the problem is if we don't have news organizations trying to.
No, they are trying to, but they only have 5 minutes to put together telling you that this place thing just blew up in downtown Nashville. And an hour or so later, we learned that, okay, it was in front of an AT&T building. Oh, another couple of hours later, we learned, hey, nobody was killed. The pieces of information develop. They come into the story. You can't possibly know every story completely and accurately all at once. You cannot.
And yet they still insist on trying to report it, as you say, immediately, as if it's all now.
Yeah, and people taking that for the absolute truth and the finality of the story. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the problem we have there's no way we could prevent that anymore, because we have things like Twitter and Facebook where you can spread information to a wide area.
The problem isn't spreading the information; it's the problem with the audience thinking it's the finality of the word. And then accusing people for incompetence or something because facts change over time.
So you're back to the problem of science improving over time.
Well, you can call it science or whatever you want. People report. They don't describe the whole damn thing at once. News develops. All news develops.
Theo says, social media can be such a channel for all kinds of propaganda, important to develop critical thinking skills and look behind the manipulation. And it's one of those things at the moment I've been banging on about in terms of education. The reason America is the way it is now is not because it's full of evangelicals, it's not because it's full of conservatives, it's because you've chosen not to educate your populace. I mean, I don't mean you mostly, but and ours is going the same way. Manda. Bias. Gender. Impartial.
Hard to follow all of that since everything's pretty much covered. So just truth.
Just truth. So you'd have the controversy of both sides of the climate change debate reported.
Fuck you, Dave. You know what I mean, god damn it.
Yes. But the point is there is consensus there. But it's a nice example, because that's what they use. The fact that there is this little bit of disagreement, that's enough to report on it as an agenda. I mean, it came up with the BBC and trans stuff at the moment, because they are putting the fact that they're putting across the other side of the opinion by allowing anti-trans groups to talk. And the people are going to the BBC. Wait a minute, if you've got someone that is trying to fight racism, you don't get white supremacists on against them. That's not the other side of the story. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very odd balance there.
I just want to say, if we're going to use something about, if we want to call our news outlets something to do with truth, I'll just point out what the Russian word for truth is. Pravda.
What's that?
Pravda.
Which means?
Truth. Anyone here know what Pravda is?
No.
Yeah. So, like that was the Daily Pravda. That was the newspaper, the state newspaper of the Communist Party for like 70 years. It's still a biased fucking newspaper to this day.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But I will just say, I know I had a long spiel on that. I mean, I will just say one more thing, and then we'll probably get on this, because I've spoken way too much on this. But I did have, a few years ago, I did get the opportunity to talk to Nick Davis, who's a reporter for The Guardian, or she was when I spoke to him. He was heavily involved in breaking something that was a very big news story, which would not have gotten reported on if it wasn't for the fact that he and a number of colleagues did a lot of digging, because of the whole get news out there now kind of thing. What turned out to be a big news story almost got killed, and he was one of, and that was actually what the fuck Murdoch's publications were doing with all the phone hacking and shit.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be that almost never didn't come to light, because it was like a tiny little thing, and most news organisations get stuff out there now, and then like don't report any further. If it wasn't for the fact there was people that spent a couple of years or so digging, that shit would never have come to light, and it would have been still going on today. And
Yes. What it is. Robbie.
Yeah, for the third time.
You'd educate people.
Yes.
They said define educate.
Yes, we did all that. That's like 5 minutes ago.
Nacho.
Yeah, I still yes.
You'd be biased.
Well,
Right.
it is what it's going to be. So.
Okay. Next question then.
What did you fucking answer?
Oh yeah, I'd fucking be biased as all hell. What I think is right. The problem I've got, right, is I don't know. I'm worried I'll soapbox a bit too much. Right, is if you have the choice to be truthful and keep Trump, or dishonest to get rid of him. As a news organization, what would you, if you were in charge, what would you do?
That makes no sense because keeping him would.
this is a hypothetical.
Someone like Trump.
Okay, let's just say then, for argument's sake, that all the fucking claims he is making about electoral fraud are true.
Yes.
That would be that's
a nice thing. If that's all true, you could prove it. You can publish that, and it would guarantee he would get another term. Would you publish that information? So you haven't even got to lie. You're just making a choice not to publish.
That's actually one of the best philosophical arguments you've come up with. God.
Right? Because you've got a bias. You obviously got your personal bias for or against him, and.
And I could give you my answer on that, but I think
What's your answer?
I would absolutely publish that information because whatever my issue with Trump is, I think that let's just say if every damn allegation he was making was true and you could prove it, that means there's a much bigger fucking problem with US democracy than fucking Trump.
Yes, but again, you could publish it in a month's time.
I'd publish it now. I'd publish it as soon as I could demonstrate it.
Yeah. Manda?
No.
Robbie?
Yes.
Nacho?
Well, it'd be the honesty.
The honesty.
I'm still on the right question.
You'd publish. Jenny?
Truth is damn near sacred.
It is. But truth doesn't matter if you've got
but
a corrupt system.
So is the Constitution. So is the concept and practice of democracy. And I would have to spend a lot of time weighing which is the more important sacred cow. Is it truth or is it the democracy and the Constitution? Both not reporting and Trump could do a lot of damage to the Constitution and democracy.
Yes.
It's evidence in the last 4 years that he would.
Yes.
So if I could rationalize it differently by printing it a month later, is whatever guy gets into office going to be responsible for all those lies and be booted out, or is it going to be all the people running the election and do it? It's one of the most impossible arguments you could have presented to me for me.
How about I offer a compromise that everyone could be happy with then?
Go on.
You come across that information, you publish it immediately in an article about yay big in about it's somewhere in the center page of in your newspaper.
It'll still get picked up.
You still fulfilled your journalistic integrity, but
another newspaper would then report it like crazy.
Made it a headline.
You basically published it. You've published it. You've made the decision.
Withholding truth is no different than lying.
Yeah, let me do this quickly. Horace says I would publish.
A bit like how the Sun published their apologies in the tiny little box every time they committed fucking libel and been caught out with it, and they published their apology like in a really tiny little box somewhere that you can't fucking read.
Right, let me do the chat quickly. James Henry says I would do anything and everything to get rid of Trump. Horace says yes, I would publish. He published leaked war crimes, in my opinion. Going back to Assange. Easy, let everyone decide. Give the same information. Julie says I'm against the bastard, but if he was truly elected, I care more about my country than about one arsehole. I'd publish immediately. The media should be the fourth power. Are they though? Trump is the nemesis of decency. There's definitely split. Go on, Jenny. You got to say yes or no.
Okay. Given the context of the question and not reality, I would withhold and get rid of Trump because I think he could do far more damage. And I'm talking about an authoritarian fascist government in place.
Excellent. Right. Next question.
But even fuck.
I already answered.
Dave.
I said I would.
Fine.
I wouldn't. In that situation, I wouldn't publish. I'd publish a month later.
You wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't. I'd publish a month later after Trump was out of office.
Yeah.
Nobody here with really ethical journalistic standards here, is there? Let's be honest.
But I don't think you can have
newspapers and media, other media, face this every day. They sit in rooms and meetings and decide: are we going to have this story? Are we going to talk about it in that way? Don't you think that this does that and that to the story if we color it this way or that way?
And the worst thing is that's only when you've got all the information. If you don't have all the information, you're making it up anyway.
You go to journalism school, and this is what they teach you. You're going to be doing. Okay, and I've been to journalism school. I just rejected it.
If you enjoyed that, please hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. If you think you've got a better answer or just want to tell us how wrong we are, leave a comment down below. Subscribe down here for new questions every day and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on our live shows. If you click over here, you'll see our latest upload. Over here, for what YouTube thinks you'll love the most. And finally, for a complete playlist of all our currently released questions, click here.